All right, so politics aside, let's look at what's happening in the media. So I don't know if you noticed, but films seem to be doing pretty well post COVID. They're really taking a resurgence, and that's a good thing. But we found out recently that things are starting to get stale again, and I don't know if that's actually the fault of anybody in production or studios, or could it be the fact that people in America just don't have money to feed themselves? So how are they going to buy a movie ticket? So I recently came back from Europe, and yeah, the economy in the UK, France, and places like that on the surface seem to be doing okay, and people are getting back to business as usual. But really, I don't think people had the money to even pay for fuel. And ever since this whole scare with Iran happened, I think the price of fuel has gone up by like 15 to 20%. So it's pretty scary. So how are people going to have spare cash to go and buy a movie ticket? And then you have a lot of movies coming out, such as something I was invited to by a friend of mine and his girlfriend to go see, which was called The Fall Guy, which looks like a brilliant film with Ryan Gosling and Emily Blunt, and the premise is wonderful. And it only made 30 million in the box office, domestically speaking, against a production budget of like 130 million. So it tanked. And in saying that, I'm really looking forward to going to that new Mad Max movie. I'm not a big fan of Anya Taylor-Joy, but ever since I saw her in The Northman, I've been taking her a lot more seriously, and I give her a lot of cred where cred is due. And you know what? Chris Hemsworth, ever since Thor number 4 came out, I sort of, had a bit of a love-hate relationship with him. But then I finally watched that fourth Thor movie, and for what it was, I think he did a okay job. So I don't hate him as much. And yet, it's not so much Anya that I'm dreading in this new Mad Max movie. It's him that I'm dreading. If he wasn't there, if they got anybody else to do it, I probably wouldn't be so cringe about going to see the film. But there you go. Hopefully he'll play a really good bad guy and whatever. So I didn't see the first one in the cinemas, and the biggest issue that most people are saying about that Mad Max movie is the fact that the first one was shot in Africa, so they could do a lot of real stunts and not worry about occupational health and safety. But this film, because of, pandemic restrictions and geopolitics and whatever, was made in Australia, and they couldn't replicate the same stunts as they did when they were in Africa, because occupational health and safety here in my country, people, is crazier than Switzerland. You can't even pick your nose without getting a fine. So a lot of the stuff that's going to be in this new movie is going to be CGI. So people aren't really hating on the fact that the protagonist is a woman, or the fact that a lot of people aren't fans of Anya Taylor-Joy and there's a lot of hate towards her. I don't think that's the main reason why people won't go see the movie. I think it's the fact that they had a benchmark of having real, visual effects, real explosions, real semi-trailer trucks and road trains getting toppled over and whatnot, and it was a gruesome production. It was very arduous for everybody involved. I think a lot of the actors even got sick from not necessarily the food, but from the weather or whatever, and it was a very crippling, grueling ordeal. And the director's getting a lot older. Like, I actually thought he passed away a couple of years back when they had something on In Memorandum, but there was a different George Miller. So I don't think the director's getting any younger, and he's probably, reaching his late 60s, early 70s, so he wanted to do it in his home country of Australia. He only, grew up probably about 4 hours away from me in Roma, and so he wanted to be somewhere a little bit more comfortable, so it wasn't going to be as grueling as the last film. But in saying that, a lot of the, special effects were CGI. And because they were CGI, a lot of people have seen the previews and they're not going to go see the movie, so I think this new Mad Max movie is going to tank purely because of that. And I was just going into the cinemas just to book some tickets for me and my friends to go see a Transformers movie, the original 1984 cartoon that's coming back in distribution, and I was checking the release, and there's not a lot of allocations for this Mad Max movie. There's probably about 4 or 5 in my big city, and I live in the second largest inland city in Australia. So I'm thinking they probably already know that they're not going to do too well, so they've only got like 4 or 5 days worth of screening. And then if the ticket sales jump up, they might put a bit more in there. But things aren't looking good. And I think it's the fact that particularly the domestic audience in America drives a lot of the profits and sales of these films. So you need to actually make a film that's relatable to what everyone is experiencing in America right now, with not even having enough food for 3 square meals a day and not having a roof over their head. You have to write a film or direct a film and produce it based on the plight of the current situation in America, like The Grapes of Wrath. And then people say, oh, this is relatable because this is happening to me right now, and even if I don't have the money for food or fuel, I'm still going to go buy a ticket and watch this because this is my story. And you need to be relatable like that. But the issue with America is it's always been bad. And every time I've been there, they always try to screen it like they screened it in France and cover everything up and say, oh, it's not that bad. It's a great place to be. Well, that's what they say to the tourists because they want your money. So I think it's always been the situation in America. Like I went from California to, Nevada to Vegas, and then the situation looked a lot worse once you get into Vegas, and people are really desperate for money and things like that. And that was like a couple of decades ago, first time I went there. So they're hiding. The Americans do a really good job of hiding the true nature of what's happening in their country from the rest of the world, because they come from a culture of not showing any weakness. And in that case, if you were to write a story about the plight of the current people in America, I think you would find that studios will not take it seriously, because that's not the image they want to portray of America being vulnerable and being weak. Not just to their enemies, but to their friends as well. That's why I always call America Fugazi land, because everything there is so phony. Well, that's my take on it, and I hope this new Mad Max movie does really well, because I really like watching chicks holding guns, so you go, Anya, you go, girl. But, yeah, I'll still buy my ticket and probably take one of my friends or a couple of my friends with me. It's not sort of movie I want to take my kids to. Although, I think my wife has seen the first one. She liked it. So I'll leave it at that and leave your comments and go from there.